Welcome and thank you for tuning in. You're listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. I'm Daniel Davis. Many of us spend a lifetime trying to cultivate a green thumb. Why? Because we enjoy what it sees when you see a plant blooming into full flavor, trying to understand and connect with it. And it's no doubt that people realize that they even talk to their plants. They even think special thoughts to find ways that they can get them to really connect. And I think that's the strangest thing, that we actually ever felt for a minute that we were ever disconnected and separate from plants. After all, we live in a completely symbiotic relationship here on planet Earth. They provide us with food, they provide us with medicinal properties, and also oxygen. And not to mention just pure beauty in and of itself, and the diverse array that we see in the foliage. On the Beyond 50 radio program today, we're going to be talking about a book called Sacred Plant Initiations. This is what you can do when you do what's known as plant dieting. And you can learn how you can commune with plants and their spirits through this particular process, which involves ingesting a particular plant over a period of time so you receive its vibratory energy. I'd like to welcome to the Beyond 50 radio program today herbalist and medicine woman Carol Guyette, joining us here on the program today, and her book, Sacred Plant Initiations. Carol, thank you for joining us here on the program today.
Hello, Daniel, and thank you for inviting me.
Now, you describe yourself as an herbalist and medicine woman, healer and teacher specializing in plant medicine. Tell us what that medicine woman term means to you.
Well, to me, I guess I should start by giving you a bit of my background, because my spiritual background includes, in the 80s, being trained by what in Europe would be called a wise woman, or someone who was trained in really traditional European shamanic healing by her maternal grandmother. Here that would be called a wise woman. I'm in Ireland, by the way, just to tell your listeners. And then in more recent years, 5 years ago, I completed a 10-year apprenticeship with a Métis medicine woman called Arwen Dreamwalker, who is a medicine woman who carries the teachings of the Beauty Way from the Diné or Navajo people. So my spiritual tradition includes a blending of both European and the Diné Beauty Way tradition that Dreamwalker teaches. And to me, walking as a medicine woman includes, for me, being a healer, but also doing sacred ceremony for the people and for the land. So the fact of doing ceremony for the people is an integral part of it.
Now, you talk about having plant diet initiation ceremonies, just as you were mentioning here. What actually goes on? What kind of people actually come to participate in these, initiations? Right.
Well, first of all, when I say initiation, it's not an initiation into a particular spiritual path or a religion. By the term initiation, I'm meaning going to another level. At an initiation, basically, it means the allowing yourself to, usually by facing a challenge within ourselves, to go to a new level in yourself. So what happens at these ceremonies is that the plants themselves take people to new places, new levels within themselves. So we're being initiated by the plants, if you like. And you asked what kind of people come. Really, all kinds of people. It's not for a kind of elite few. Regular people who just love plants and nature come, because it's a way to develop a deep relationship with the plant, as you said at the beginning. So a way to get to know a plant really well and to receive its gifts for guidance and for healing, and also to be able to give back. So what we actually do at a plant diet or plant initiation, as you said, basically I make an extract of a plant in advance that we call an elixir, which is made very ceremonially and with focused intent to honour the plant and also bring through all its qualities, because these work on the physical, emotional, mental, spiritual level. And it makes, you could say plants always work on all those levels, which they do, but through the method of preparation for these elixirs, it makes those qualities very accessible, easily accessible. So basically I make an elixir in advance, and then typically what we're doing here, and have been for about 8 years, are group ceremonies. So it'll be a group of people who gather together, and the ones I've described in the book are typically 2 or 3 days long. So we periodically ingest the elixir while fasting over this period of time. And we're fasting because this really helps people to be much more receptive to all the gifts coming from the plant. And if people aren't medically able to fast, then there are specific foods that I usually recommend. So during the time of the plant initiation, we spend our time in various activities and spiritual practices, which would range from being outside with a plant, so attuning to a plant in nature, and spending time also in meditations inside. All sorts of activities designed to promote what I would call deep dreaming with a plant. So this could include all sorts of inner journeys. It might also include dancing or singing or artwork. And then at night, we sleep as a group in the ceremonial space. And this is all done very much in ceremony. So at the beginning, we call to spirit and we pray. So it's really honouring the whole of nature. And then at the final day, we share our experiences and finish with a shared feast. So that's sort of the basic outline. Really, I allow the plants to guide the whole thing, because that's really where it comes from. By working in ceremony, it connects the physical and the spiritual very easily, and so opens gateways to spiritual realms. And this facilitates development for all of us at all levels: physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual. So there can be a lot of personal development and healing that occurs, but also we always have an intent to help the collective. So there's a lot of collective healing that can go on. So really the plant is our sacrament, and it's offering us communion with spirit. So I hope that gives you some idea.
Well, it does, and what was interesting is I was reading in your book, especially there was a part, and it's in the very beginning, where you talk about harvesting the plant. And in fact, I would like to go ahead and read a part of that for our listeners. You say, in harvesting for the elixir involves spending time with the plants, listening and watching, being appreciative, asking for permission, and paying attention so that you know the correct time and the correct parts to harvest. Now, on the other hand, and especially if you don't already have a close relationship with the plant you want to harvest, you may find that a plant needs to be carefully courted before you can pick it. Now, what's interesting about reading about that is it reminds me of the Carlos Castaneda series, The Teachings of Don Juan. And he was describing, for instance, the journey of harvesting mescalito, you know.
Right.
And so they're out and they're finding it, and he realizes, you know, and Don Juan's suggesting you've got to connect with it, just as what you're saying here. And you need to take your time and court this. And what's interesting is you've got to find the right ones that will allow themselves to be pulled from the ground. Now, as that happens, you're going to leave, and there's a particular threshold that until you cross it, these bags that you have collected these mescalito buttons in will become heavy. And that's because they're reaching, trying to go back into the ground again. But once you cross this particular threshold, then you'll realize the bags are light and they're allowing themselves to go with you. And Carlos was describing that exact process, was saying that's exactly what happened, that it felt like, you know, he was carrying the earth on his shoulders, and then at one point he crossed over this invisible threshold and the bags just became light. And I always found that fascinating, and that's exactly what you describe here in the ceremonial plant initiation and diet.
Yes, that's exactly it. And what you'll find is, in my experience, that some plants have much stronger personalities than others. So a strong plant like the one you're describing there would require a lot more courting, for instance, than, say, maybe a daisy. But to some extent, they all do. So there's also this aspect of knowing the plant personality and really having to work with that, absolutely. So, yeah, that's actually a great example.
Now, what I'd like to do for the listeners, I know that there are a couple of events coming up, but it would be interesting to talk about the plants, and perhaps you can share characteristics that people wouldn't think about. Now, Dandelion Diet at Dominaire, Italy, which happens in April of this year. Now, first of all, tell us about that particular, initiation, and let's talk about the dandelion, because this here is a weed that's all over the world, and for some reason Americans love buying their Roundup and just trying to destroy their, these things out of their yard. But let's talk about what exactly the dandelion is and what it brings to us.
Well, I'm glad you asked about dandelion, actually, because we also were just at the spring equinox last weekend doing a diet here in Ireland with the dandelion. And really, the dandelion is an amazing plant that is I really feel it's bringing so much to the planet at this time. And it's tends to be so undervalued and underestimated. And as you said, people tend to complain about it and just want to eradicate it from their lawns. But actually, just to give you a few brief things about it, I see it, and from our experiences, because we've dieted with dandelion several times here over the last few years, I see it really as a messenger from heaven that's bringing heaven to earth, or helping us to embody heaven on earth. And if you look at the dandelion and how it just is, these things are actually usually pretty simple. For instance, you've got this amazing seed head, which actually, with the right wind, the seeds can go out in all directions and apparently cover hundreds of miles. But there's this amazing seed head which holds, it's got a lot of lunar attributes, but it also, you could see it is holding a reflection of the whole cosmos. So there are these seeds that go out widely. There's also the flower, which holds solar energy, so it's bringing a lot of solar sun power. There's all the watery nature of the stem and the leaves, and then you've got this root, which really anchors whatever is coming into the earth, and also brings up nutrients from the earth. And this may sound very simplistic of just simply describing the plant, but actually these attributes of the plant have a profound meaning and effect on us as humans if we allow them to. Because all these plants have, as I was saying earlier, not just physical effects, and dandelion is an amazing medicinal plant for the physical body, but as well as that, emotional, mental, and these quite profound spiritual effects. And dandelion is like a spiritual warrior, or it is a spiritual warrior, and it's really tenacious and really determined to spread its message, and you can really see that by how difficult it is to eradicate. And I think it's really, our experience here has been that it's really determined to spread the spiritual message, and actually is bringing great gifts to us as humans, which, people may find this sounds a bit, unexpected, but the common plants around us that often we think of as weeds are actually sometimes can be the most significant. But it's almost like they've been hiding themselves, and maybe they've needed to for whatever reason, but during the course of history, actually, the dandelion is widespread throughout the planet. So for me, it's like it has this plan that it's working to, as a lot of plants, well, all the plant world does, and it's sort of quietly doing its job, and it's amazing. People probably mostly don't realise.
It's fascinating, and the reason I brought that up is we had a guest on our program out of Washington, and she runs, I shouldn't say runs, but has a farm out there, and it's part of what's known as the community sustained agricultural thing. I probably am saying that wrong, but what happens is that she allows people who come to her place from around the world who are interested in farming and the whole process, mm-hmm. and they come and they stay with her, and she feeds them and makes sure they have a place to sleep and the whole bit, and in return what they do is they provide the services of working on the farm. And she takes the approach from a very holistic approach. It isn't let's jump on the tractor and plow the field, but a real being in touch with nature sort of farming, really understanding the old ways of it. But anyway, we brought her on the program, and we talked about the dandelion, and she says, the interesting thing about the dandelion is that when you begin to see those in your yard, it's there because your yard and the soil lack calcium. And I wouldn't have thought of something like that. So this plant really comes to replace calcium. And I thought, wow, that's pretty interesting. Here we're trying to wipe out this plant, as I was mentioning earlier, with all these toxic, poisons, so we can have this nice green lawn. But the fact is, you're seeing these more and more at farmers markets being sold as food, as nutritional supplementation. And it's just amazing how far we've come back to where we were once before.
Yeah, that's right. And dandelion is interesting because it is really a plant connected with humans. So it loves to grow near humans. And we are supposed to use it, and as you say, the food value is enormous. Aside from anything else, the nutrients in the leaves of dandelion simply used as salad, and it's, as a herbal medicine, it's a fantastic diuretic, which is the most perfect diuretic because the leaves contain high potassium, and when you excrete, a diuretic basically removes water from the body, excess fluid. So, and when you excrete water, you also lose potassium. So if, for instance, you're prescribed a pharmaceutical diuretic, you're usually given a potassium supplement to make up for the potassium that's lost. Whereas in dandelion, which is a natural diuretic, there's full of potassium, so it naturally replaces what leaves the body when the water leaves.
Carol, if I could stop you on that note just for a minute, and this is really weird. Just yesterday I was replying to a YouTube comment on a segment we did called the High Blood Pressure Hoax. And I decided as you were talking about the diuretic, let me go ahead and read what this man says. I am currently on 3 different blood pressure medications, a diuretic, a beta blocker, and a calcium channel blocker, I was also told I had CHF, whatever that means. Blood tests showed a potassium deficiency, but the doctor said that did not matter. What should I do?
Well, he certainly needs a potassium supplement, but obviously I can't comment on a medical condition.
No, I understand that. I'm not asking you to do that. I just found it interesting. You were talking about how the dandelion actually gives you potassium, and here, that's what struck me and why I wanted to read that. It wasn't for you to render any medical advice.
Yeah, no, it's a synchronicity there, isn't it?
Absolutely. Let the plant wisdom help you get away from the medications that came from plants mostly in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, back to the dandelion again.
Yeah, so I've been invited to go in a couple of weeks, as you said, to Damanhur in Italy to do a dandelion plant diet, and they are a spiritual community in northern Italy, and dandelion has been their signature plant for many years. So they're very familiar with a lot of its spiritual qualities. So that's going to be very interesting, working with the dandelion there with them, because they're very open to the spiritual qualities already. So it'll be interesting to see what comes. We have to, at these ceremonies, as I said earlier, I have to simply surrender to the plant and let the plant bring whatever it's bringing. So that's really what I encourage everyone to do when they come, simply to surrender to the plant. The plants are very, I think they're really wanting to help us at this time. It seems to me they can actually really help us with our evolution, and they're evolving ahead of us, and they are so generous, which in a way you might think it was surprising considering how they've been mistreated, you could say. But it's like they really want to bring their gifts to help us as humans to develop and evolve and really learn to come from our hearts and be the sacred humans that we're supposed to be. And I think that actually holds a lot of hope for the planet. If we can heal our relationship between humans and plants.
Now another edition. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go on.
Well, I was going to say the next initiation that I'd like to bring up happens in September, and this is in a place that I was very familiar with when I was growing up, and that is the Redwood initiation, which happens at Rivers Bend Retreat Center in Philo, California. Now, tell us about the significance of the Redwood, because that there is one of the oldest plants on Earth.
Yes, and I'm actually very excited about going to do that. I feel really honoured. The redwood is, as you say, one of the oldest plants on Earth, or really the giant redwood, the tallest tree on Earth. And they spiritually are seen as messengers for the entire tree world. It's often said that they receive messages from the cosmos and bring them to all the other trees and then the other plants. So they're like very, very much working directly between heaven and earth and bringing messages down. So it'll be very interesting to see what they bring. It's going to be amazing, actually, to be able to work with the Redwood.
I would imagine it would, and maybe we might even garner a glimpse at Bigfoot.
Yeah.
You know, this is always such a fascinating subject, and your book is Sacred Plants Initiations, which people can get a hold of probably by PDF, but that's being published here and coming out when?
It actually came out last weekend.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so it's available now in America. It's not yet made it to Europe, but so you have it before I do.
Oh, good. Well, I love reading about this because you start going out into the world and looking at plants and experiencing them in much different ways when you realize there is a way that they're actually looking at you. There's a way that they're connecting with you if you're just willing to open up and tune in and listen.
Yeah, you're so right. And I find, like a lot of the people who come to the ceremonies here, when they first come, they may not have a particularly close relationship with plants or with nature. And what I've seen over time is that actually by experiencing what the plants bring at these ceremonies, people have, it's changed their lives. Because it has changed, one of the things it does is change people's whole perception of what plants are and make them aware of plants having consciousness. And so then it changes people's whole perception of nature. As you say, suddenly they're looking at nature and aware of it in a completely different way. So that naturally changes how you view life. And I hope that the more we all appreciate the consciousness and the spirit within all things, the more we come to respect it, and the harder it is then to abuse nature in the way that we have tended to do in recent times.
Mm-hmm. Carol, is there a website our listeners can find out more about your book and, of course, the plant initiations and dietings that are happening around the world?
There is indeed. There's my website, which is derrynagita.ie, which I'll spell for you because none of your listeners will know what I'm talking about. Derry Nagita is the name of our centre here in Ireland, and in Ireland all the land is divided into what are called townlands. So Derry Nagita is actually the name of the townland, which means the oak wood of the left-handed people. So it's an Irish name, basically. So the spelling is DERRYNAGITTAH, and that's .ie. So that would give information on the plant ceremonies and all the work we do here.
So I'll go ahead and respell that again just for our listeners. That's D as in date, ERRYNAGITTAH, right? .ie?
That's it, absolutely, yes.
Very good. And how do you say that word, just out of curiosity?
Derry Nagita.
Derry Nagita. I like that.
Yeah,
DerryNagita.ie is where you'll find out more about ceremonies and courses and plant diets as well. Carol, I want to thank you so much for joining us here on the program today. This is always such a treat.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. It's lovely to talk to you.
And maybe you'll swing through Portland, Oregon when you're finished with the Redwood ceremony and come up here and give a talk, and we can visit and find out more.
Yeah, maybe. I'd love to. Thank you.
Very good. Carol, thank you for joining us here on the program today.
Thank you, Daniel.
We want to thank you, the listeners out there, for tuning in. This is the Beyond 50 radio program. You can find out more also by visiting us at Beyond50Radio.com. And be sure to follow us on Twitter at Beyond 50 Radio as well. I'm Daniel Davis. Thank you for tuning in. This is the Beyond 50 Radio program. And remember, live your day past halfway.